Hi, my name is Matt Van Hook. On the ballot, you'll see me as Matthew Van Hook, my full name. I am Orange County born and raised, and then in 1995, I left Orange County after graduating high school to go to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, where I graduated in 1999 as a distinguished academic grad and went off to pilot training, and then spent the next 22 years flying for the Air Force and also teaching at the Air Force Academy in the Department of Political Science and in the Academy Scholars Program. And then I retired just last year in May of 2021, moved back to my home area here in Fullerton. I was actually born at St. Jude's, and now I live very close, much closer than I ever expected to live next to the hospital I was born in. And I have been back for about a year. I am a professor at Biola University. And after being here, I had a lot of the parents come up and said, hey, your kids are in the schools here. There's a lot of stuff going on. And we think you're the kind of person that you've spent your life in public service. You've been a leader. You've been the Deputy Chief of Staff of Air Force's Central Command. You've been a professor. You have worked with youth groups for 20 years. You know high schoolers very well. You have high schoolers. We think that you could do a lot of good on the board. We think there's a lot of things that could be improved. And the race coming up will probably be unopposed unless you run. And as someone who believes highly in giving the citizens choice, and because I really do think I can do a fantastic job and make huge improvements on the board, I decided to run. Great, yeah. So in terms of skills that I would say fall outside of any one particular class, there might be parts of it in a class here or there. The number one skill right now is actually financial management. We have a lot of students that come to college. I've been teaching in college for a long time, and there are students that are like, they're afraid of a budget, if that makes sense. And part of that is, at college, some of them are able to still kind of like, hey, my college is paid for. I'm on campus and I'm getting meals. I don't have to think too hard about it now. And then they become seniors and start quickly thinking about like, oh, I'm moving out. I have to figure out how much I'm going to be making, how much I can get for rent, how much is food going to cost. And they really feel sort of flummoxed with feeling like this is thrown at them. I think waiting till college is way too late. I think we could go back and do some of that in high school. It's probably not going to be a full course. I'm thinking a shorter course like we do with health, where it's a certain amount of lessons where they can feel confident in thinking through a budget and life. And especially in California, where the cost of living is extremely high, it's very difficult to figure all that stuff out. And again, housing costs are going to rise in the next few years, obviously, while they're there, but they're the kinds of things that they would know to look for that and say, oh, wow, the rents are going up. I need to start thinking about how I'd be budgeting more for rent. I have had students before now from other states that are like, I'm going to move to California because they're paying me the most money, and they have not taken into account whatsoever the cost of living. And they realize, wow, the company offered me 2 locations, and although I was getting $10,000 more in California, I would have been better off in Indiana because they were offering me $10,000 less, but they were also putting me in a place where there's a lot of houses that are cheap or whatever. So I think that's the number one skill. The other skill that I would really like to see is a continuation of teaching students to be familiar with technology in a safe and structured way. I think we are doing some of that now. I'd love to see that maybe go even further to where those students are thinking about privacy and identity. I mean, it's even changed in the last 5 years, right? In terms of what you can do to protect yourself. It's almost impossible to turn every tracker off your phone now. So you have to then start thinking about, if I can't turn everything off, how do I start thinking about what I put out there? I'll tell you, my number one thing is, if you start writing every text as though it will someday be public, you'd start getting in the right mindset for saying that's just living in the digital age. We don't have a lot of ability to speak privately in electronic forums, so just get used to saying things that you'd be happy if other people knew about them. And that's just, I think, part of the digital age. And so we could prepare people better for that, I think. So even to the fact, I'm just thinking offhand of, I know people who act very differently on a video game than somewhere else, but even like a line of text string in a video game, you got to think that could be public someday. And would that be the image you'd want to portray of yourself? So, yeah. Great. So I think that one of the most important things we can do is start helping students to work through the fact that they're all coming from different cultural backgrounds. Some of them may or may not have seen that depending on their elementary school at the elementary school level, but as they start filtering up and going to different high schools, they're going to see a bunch of different cultural backgrounds, and they're going to see a bunch of different people whose life experiences are different than those. I would hope that from the young age they've been able to learn to respect one another as human beings. And I have one of my favorite students ever. I know I'm not supposed to say I have favorites, but her name is Hannah. And she was one of my students at Air Force Academy, wrote her master's thesis at Oxford on civic respect and civic dialogue. And I love the idea, which is teaching students how to look at each other as human beings and fellow citizens and saying, no matter where we came from or what our differences are, we can talk with one another because we both live in the same place where our rights, our freedoms are protected, and we can acknowledge our differences at the same time where we actually will affirm our care for one another as fellow citizens. Great. Yeah. So one thing I will just say, and I know we're almost out of time. So one thing that I learned from years and years and years of leadership is the worst thing that someone can do when they're moving into a new position is go in and say, I've got all the answers. I'm going to throw everything out. I think the most important first step that I can do is a deep assessment on the things that we have been paying for and talking to the people who bought them, asking the questions of why we bought them, what are we doing to help them, and making sure we're doing great assessment of those things to make sure we're getting the return on those investments we make. One thing I would cut right off the top right now is I just saw something that happened on Monday where a $152,000 contract was signed with a extremely controversial survey company. I would probably pull that immediately and start looking at bidding that out to a wider range of people. The other one that I would pull is, and I know nobody's going to believe me on this, but I got asked when I was walking and meeting citizens in the neighborhood and doing my campaign canvassing. One of the citizens said, how do I know you're not doing it just for the money? I said, well, there is no money, so that's how you know. And they said, no, yes, there is. And I said, no, there's not. Really? And then, so she brings up on the California website, she said, yeah, this shows that the school board members get paid, and I did not know that. So actually, the first thing I would probably do is look at maybe potentially cutting the board's pay and having it go back to being a fully civic duty where all of us just do it on our own time. So, and it looks like I'm out of time, but I'll just say I would fund athletics to a strong level if we were asking what one thing I would fund. So.